shop.
Excellent. You're back, and it's time for another episode of What's in the Shop. Let's get down to it. I'm going to talk about one of the most important bands in rock and roll history. You could say they were the inventors of heavy metal. Some say they were the godfathers of Britpop. David Bowie said this songwriter I'm talking about, singer, frontman, songwriter, is one of the all-time enduring great British songwriters ever. Who am I talking about? None other than Los Kinks, or the Kinks to you and me. Let's get down to this. Who are the Kinks? Kinks are a great band. Super underrated, kind of been the all-time outsiders of rock and roll, but man, can they write some great songs. And they influenced tons of people. And you probably have heard more Kink songs than you realize. Only a real Kink fanatic would be able to tell that they're hearing Kink songs, because most people, well, Kinks got lost in the shuffle. Let me tell you why real quick. Kinks are basically Ray and Dave Davies, Mick Avery, I forgot the other guys' names, but Dave and Ray are the front man. Ray is a singer, songwriter, Dave plays guitar, Ray does too, writes as well. So those two brothers, and they have a reputation for always scrapping and getting in punch-ups and whatever. We'll get to that in a minute. Infamous feud always between the brothers. You thought the Gallagher brothers were bad? These guys set the precedent. Well, hey, these guys set the tone. They are the granddaddies of Britpop, so there you go. Anyway, in the early 60s, Kinks started in 63. In the early 60s, the British invasion happened. Not in England, obviously, but here on other shores. Beatles, Stones, Who, can't do without the Kinks. Most people say Beatles, Stones, and Who. Why? Because the Kinks were not allowed to tour America for, I don't know, was it 8 years or so? Somewhere around there, 6, 7, 8 years? I don't know. But I'll tell you why. Kinks put out a single in 1964, was a cover version. Their second single, Third single, The Invention of Heavy Metal, got them international, worldwide success. I'm talking about You Really Got Me. All you guys know that song. Whether you know it or not, and it's the Kinks who did that song, who wrote that song. Ray Davies wrote that song. Anyway, the Kinks wanted to capitalize on this whole British invasion, wanted to get to America, wanted to get to the biggest music market in the world, which is America, still is. So the Kinks go do their world tour. Stones came, Beatles came, The Who came. The Kinks were going to come. What happened? Kinks are doing a few dates. They get out, I think in Cow Palace in San Francisco or whatever. There's a problem with the musicians union. They don't want them to appear on a TV show or a certain amount of time. I don't know what. Supposedly, Ray says this is one of those weird instances in rock and roll lore that's kind of clouded. The guy piped off to Ray, the head of the union, the musicians union, started making slights about, him being British, oh, limey, whatever. Ray gave him a good punch. That's it. You're banned. You can never come back to America. So, from 1965 until early 70s, Kinks never came to America. A lot of people forgot about them. Stones, Beatles, Who, they all got bigger. The Kinks had to go back home and just work on their own land and in Europe. Ray was kind of hurt by that, kind of being shunned, because he loved America. And he says part of his super Britishness, i.e. the predecessor to Britpop, I've got a cup of tea, la la la. That was all because he kept writing about that environment to protect himself from, being shunned from the other big country out there. So he lost himself, so to speak, in this Britishness. Anyway, by the time the 70s come around, they have a hit with Lola. Everybody knows that song. Then Ray got into this thing where he's writing concept albums, rock operas / concept albums. Not doing too good. No one really was into it. His label wasn't even really into it. Now, here's where we're building up to speed. The Kinks had lost traction in America. They had some minor hits and, okay hits in England. But I think the last time they had a charting album was 1967, up until what we're about to talk about. Anyway, mid-70s, late 70s, Kinks had just finished 5 albums in a row of concept albums. Clive Davies is starting a new label. He had just been ousted from his previous label, left the previous label. He wanted to get the Kinks, but he had one condition: you cannot do any more concept albums. Ray agreed. Adding to this, I have to tell you, the Kinks had just built a new studio, the Conk Studios, and they also started a record label. They put a 24-track board in. I think somewhere I read that it was actually Pink Floyd's board. So anyway, Ray said all this new studio, just a whole new vibe, a new sound. He was ready to go. And Clive Davies from Arista Records said, no more concept. If you can promise me that, I'll get you in the States. We'll put you on tour. We'll give you a big push with your albums. I'll make you a star. And he did. Ray agreed. And voila, that puts us where we are. 1977. Oh, I forgot to mention. Hendrix said these guys were the best band. Let me back up a little. I should have said this at the beginning. Hendrix had said the Kinks were the best band he ever saw. Yep. Another little known fact, or unknown fact, is Jim Morrison actually admitted to stealing the riffs from All Day and All of the Night to write the Doors hit, Hello, I Love You. Go back and listen. You can hear it's blatant. Anyway, even in the 60s, while these guys, even the Doors are blowing up, the Kinks were asserting an influence, and it all got stopped when they were banned from America. But now it's the summer of 76, let's say. Punk rock is blowing up. They're against all these old rockers. But for whatever reason, there's kind of an affinity. The punks kind of like the Kinks because the punks keep covering Kinks songs. And later in Britpop, Blur loves the Kinks. You can hear it everywhere, that there's a huge influence. But anyway, the Kinks come to the States. They're going to tour behind this classic album, 1977's Sleepwalker. One of my favorite Kinks records ever. I love this record. Why? Because of the great songs on it. And it's a great cover, I think. Life on the Road, that's Ray singing about life on the road, obviously. Mr. Big Man, that's about record company guys, I think. He didn't get along good with the record company guys. Sleepwalker. If for no other reason, these 2 albums I'm talking about, the title tracks alone are worth the purchase of these. And like I said, look at this beauty. Unopened original pressing here in the shop. Brother. Interesting story about that. Dave wrote that. Probably about his brother or inspirational somewhere. And Clive Davies wanted to release this as a single. Of course they didn't, but he wanted to release it as a single because he thought it was on par with Bridge Over Troubled Water, that it would really blow up. Jukebox music. That is, to me, I'm telling you, man, these songs on these albums, awesome. Great tune. Right there, man. Sleepwalker, jukebox music, paid for. Trust me on that. Sleepless Nights, Stormy Sky, Full Moon, Life Goes On. Great song. Great album. Now, summer of 77, the Kinks are getting reintroduced to the American audience. This record catches on at the radio stations. I think the single gets up to number 40, which would have been their first top 40 hit in 7 years, the last one being Lola before that, if I'm correct. So now the Kinks are out on the road. Let me back up. I love this record. Let me tell you what the Melody Maker said. The British press, the British Music Weekly said, Sleepwalker emphatically testifies to the dramatic artistic revival of Raymond Douglas Davies. That's Ray's full name. And in fact, on this album, all the songs are credited to R.D. Davies, whose supreme talents have kind of been overlooked the last couple years because they got lost in all those, distressingly overlooked in all those concept albums. But Sleepwalker really is the group's strongest and most organized album in years. I have to agree. Great. So the band's getting pushed. Clive's putting money behind them. They go out on the road. This is what's crazy. Some of the bands that the Kinks toured with, Ray said, some of them they shouldn't have played with, but some of the more interesting ones they played with were, let's see, Cheap Trick. They went on the road with Cheap Trick. Can you imagine seeing Cheap Trick and the Kinks together? Also, it was key in '77. They got on the comedy show, the weekly standard comedy show in the United States, Saturday Night Live. And this was an important show because in the 70s, late 70s, Steve Martin was huge. And Steve Martin was the host this night. So the Kinks got to play with a show that obviously had a huge audience. That's pushing things along quite nicely. So they do their summer tour, they do Saturday Night Live, and then by the end of the year, the Kinks do a non-album single called Father Christmas. And this single is great. I remember hearing that song when I was a kid and I loved it. And my older brother told me who it was. Ever since that single was released, every year at Christmas time, they play that on the radio. It's a staple, just like Wham's Last Christmas. Great tune. The B-side of that had a song called Prince of the Punks. Funny little story about that. And I'm going to tell it to you right here. I mentioned earlier the Kinks had a record label called Conk. One of the guys that David signed to the label, he didn't have a good relationship with, and that guy was named Tom Robinson. Some of you may know Tom Robinson. A lot of you don't know, and that's okay because he wasn't big everywhere, just mainly in England. But anyway, this Prince of the Punks, Ray wrote a song about this guy who's watching the fads, waiting and seeing what kind of fad this guy could get on, jump on the bandwagon and make it big. Well, guess what? Tom Robinson jumped on this punk bandwagon, did a single called 2468 Motorway, became a huge hit. Tom Robinson going from nowhere, nobody, boom, everybody knew who Tom Robinson was. Made Ray a little sour because he didn't have that kind of hit for years now. So anyway, he wrote that about that, and that became a staple on the radio, that Father Christmas. You should look that up. Great single. They finish out the year touring with Hall & Oates. That's a bit of a weird one. But hey, in the 70s, Hall & Oates were pretty cool as opposed to the MTV era. Now, they finish out the year with Hall & Oates, and guess what happens? A week, 2 weeks into January 1978, this young upstart group called Van Halen comes out, puts their first single out, and guess what it is? A cover of the Kinks. The Kinks, You Really Got Me. That was the Kinks' third single. This is Van Halen's first. Boom, guess what? Everybody's talking about the Kinks now. They seen him on TV with Steve Martin. They hear the super heavy version of the Kinks. Punks are playing Kinks songs. What the heck is going on? There's this whole Kinks revival. They're really taking off in the States. Not only did Van Halen put out a Kinks song early on in '78, but not long after, or close around the same time, Robert Palmer did the same Kinks tune, You Really Got Me, on his Double Fun album. Then the Jam put out David Watts. So you're getting the Kinks, the real live Kinks, and then you're getting this new generation of punk rockers singing some of their heroes songs. I told you they're totally influential. 1978 is off to a bang. So leads us to our next album. Summer of '78, I believe it is. They put out this I forgot to mention. Did I mention that? This was their 16th album. Remember, 5 albums before this, it was all rubbish concept albums. There's a few good tracks out there, don't get me wrong, in that phase. Kinks started out great, got a little lost, come back swinging with both here. That's 1977. 1978, they're on a roll, man. Then they put this out, Misfits. Kind of self-fulfilling title. Like I said, the Kinks have always been the great dark horse or underdogs, outsiders of rock and roll. And that's what this album's about. In fact, I believe, who was it? The All Music Guide said this was rock and roll's greatest, or one of rock and roll's great midlife crisis albums. 77, the last album out, the Kinks are in the States. Guess what? One of their big heroes, Elvis Presley, dies. Ray starts to wonder, I've kind of been lost for a while. No one knows who I am. Should I even be playing rock and roll at this age? But thankfully, he kept going. Because really and truly, with this record, Sleepwalker, it reignited their career. And they were going to just keep blowing up, going from strength to strength to strength, up into the early 80s. This is my whole favorite phase of the Kinks. Classic 60s Kinks, great. Waterloo, Sunset, Days, Dedicated Follower of Fashion, whatever you want to say. All awesome. But then you start getting into this rock and roll stuff, like great stuff and these great ballads. Man, this stuff will knock your shoes off. One thing, they're off to a great start. 1978's off to a great start. Van Halen and all those guys putting out Kinks songs. The Kinks put this out summer of 78. I got to mention, the first single was the title track, Misfits. Now, Clive had another idea, Clive Davies. He said, let's get the radio guys to really play this song. And we're going to do that by putting out a single for Misfits, which was a completely misfit single. What I'm saying is, it was a 7-inch square black record in a round sleeve that was too short for the record. Pretty ingenious. Obviously, it got the attention of some of the radio programmers because Misfits beat out Sleepwalker and got up to number 30, which again was the highest ranking single they had had since Lola or Ape Man, 1970. It doesn't matter because Lola and Ape Man are on the same album. So anyway, this has the Kinks back in the charts. Again, things are looking great. Did some great tours on this. Wait a minute. Let me just tell you about this real quick. Great tracks on this one too. Really cool. Like they're in that Playhouse mirror with that distorted look. Permanent Waves. Oh, that's side 2. Let's not talk about side 2. Side 1, Misfits. Great. Hay Fever. It's all right. Live Life. Here it is. The 1-2 punch right here, man. Misfits starts the album. You don't even get through side 1 before you get knocked out with the hook with Rock and Roll Fantasy. Gotta be, for me, maybe my favorite Kinks song ever. Fantastic. And then it's followed up with In a Foreign Land. That's another great one. Permanent Waves, great. Black Messiah, Out of the Wardrobe, another great one there. Trust Your Heart, that's great. And Get Up. Great record. Kinks are still moving with a lot of momentum and touring with some pretty amazing bands in 1978. They're on the road with Blondie. They're on the road with, you may have heard of these guys, they did some dates with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. That's pretty cool. And what's really cool is for a while on one of the legs of the tour, that's this new opening act you may have heard of that came out in 1978, the Cars. Can you imagine seeing the Kinks in the Cars? Kind of a weird bill, but it's cool. Blondie and the Kinks would have been great to see. Now they're out doing that. Momentum's going great. And guess what? Early 79, this group, Pretenders, once again, puts out Kinks single, Stop Your Sobbing. It's out on this debut album. This is a great copy. Rock de los Ochentas, rock of the 80s on here, y'all. Mexican copy. Great. Dave and Chrissy ended up getting married. Some of you may know that. I forgot to mention while they were out on the road touring with Blondie and whatever, I think they even did something with Pablo Cruz or one of those weird bands. Like I said, Ray said there were some acts he wasn't crazy about. But just to let you know how big the Kinks were, what a big deal they were at this phase. When they were in Milwaukee on this tour, they were introduced by a special guest. Spock! When you got Spock from Star Trek introducing you, my friends Ray and Dave Davies, the Kinks, things are going your way. Let me just tell you one more thing real quick about these two. Like I said, I love this record, love the cover, love this record, great. Both of these covers were done by a guy named James Wedge. James had a start in fashion and then moved to photography and did a lot of photography for fashion mags and whatever. And his specialty was black and white photos with hand-colored, touch-ups, which is evident here with this clown mask and whatever. Really nice job. Really great fashion photos if you're into that. But before his job as a photographer, he opened up some clothing stores. And this is early 60s, so he was servicing this whole swing in London thing going on, Twiggy, all these guys and whatever, these up-and-coming guys. These other chumps who were making it in America were buying stuff from him, believe it or not. But he opened two shops, Top Gear and Countdown, over on the Kings Road because the trendy Carnaby Street was too expensive. So he's over on Kings Road, which again ties into the whole punk thing. It's weird how punk keeps going in and out of this Kinks story. But anyway, he's selling to these trendy guys and whatever. Mick Jagger, on the footage that you see of the Stones concert in Hyde Park that they did after Brian died, the free concert, Mick is wearing that white frilly thing. He bought that at James Wedge's shop, Countdown. So there you have it. And it's also said that this James Wedge character helped start with the little RAF symbol that became a badge of honor for the mods, leading into Britpop and all that. Think about it. James Wedge supposedly was the granddaddy of that, who turned that into a big fashion symbol, the mod target or the RAF symbol, whichever you say. I think it's the RAF. I don't know. I'm not British. I don't fly a plane, but if I remember right, it is. Anyway, in closing, a few other, like I said, during this time, 77, 78, a lot of punk rock is blowing up. A lot of people covering Kinks songs. One of was the Stranglers, the Jam, the Pretenders. Elvis Costello did that. Bowie said Ray Davies was one of the greatest songwriters ever. Covered Kinks' tune on Pinups, and then one of the later albums he did a cover of Waterloo Sunset, or it was on a single. The Fall did some Kinks covers, the Stranglers, as I said, and of course Van Halen. Newer guys, you know, Mudhoney, some of those Sub Pop guys, they put out a whole album about their favorite Kinks songs. So you get all those grunge guys doing it too. Like I said, huge influence, but you wouldn't know it because a huge part of their career, they didn't exist on this side of the ocean. Thank God Clive Davis signed him to Arista, came out with this punch, then the left hook. It was all over from that. The next album they would put out, low budget, became their biggest album, actually. And then they just, like I said, went from strength to strength. It was great. The Kinks are great. They're still great. Ray is great. Dave is great. Dave had a solo album come out, compilation, like a year or two ago with a bunch of tracks. Really cool stuff on that. As the newspaper, the Oklahoman, said, at any rate, if you haven't given the Kinks a listen lately, maybe you should give it a try. I couldn't concur more. Two favorite Kinks albums from the 70s. Love them. Power-packed hits. Jukebox music. Rock and Roll Fantasy. Misfits. Sleepwalker. Out of the Wardrobe. What more could you want, kids? Fantastic stuff. Thanks for spending time with me. Hope you learned something about the Kinks. If you're not that familiar with the Kinks, please go check out the Kinks. You will be glad you did. As always, get in touch. If you want to drop a line, you can do it here on Instagram. If you're watching YouTube, you can leave a message or send an email to noisyrecordsmx@hotmail.com. Thanks so much, guys. Everybody take care. Keep on rocking.